Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems, the ones you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve while rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. So what exactly is Sleepy Time Tales? What is it for? What is this strange thing, this strange idea, this podcast that you're supposed to fall asleep to? Lack of sleep is a health crisis in the 21st century, and this is a podcast intended to help those that it can to get a restful night. Do you find yourself lying awake at night, mind spinning and emotions in turmoil with anxieties of 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to help you into a restful night. Sleepy Time Tales is intended to be used as a distraction to what keeps you awake at night, or sometimes background noise or company. That's why I make these episodes quite long, so that I'm here for you, without any pressure of the end coming. Now, as far as I know, there are a couple of different ways to engage. The primary idea is that it gives you something to focus on, a story or an event that lets you keep your mind on a specific point, to stop it from spinning out into stress and anxieties, to focus just enough not to resist the embrace of a night's sleep when it comes for you. Maybe you need something a bit simpler, a little bit more primal. Maybe you just need some kind of background noise. Some people like white noise, or the sound of the ocean, or wind in the trees, or the rain, or some boring dude droning on in the background. What counts, though, as you listen is that you don't try to force the sleep. Just keep a light mental grip on the thread of the story and allow the need for sleep to come for you. I'm hoping that you're asleep before I get to the end of the episode, but don't feel pressurized. It may not work on your first night. It'll probably take a few nights for you to get used to listening to my voice. Maybe my accent is strange to you. Maybe one episode just isn't long enough. Or maybe the problem isn't so much going to sleep. Maybe your problem is waking up in the middle of the night. What I recommend, because it's what works for me, is to let the podcast run all night. Download a whole bunch of episodes, enough to go through the whole evening. Put them into a playlist, and then when you go to bed, start them up and let them go. That way, if it's still running when you find yourself awake at 3 a.m., you can just carry on listening and allow yourself to go straight back to sleep again. You can even do the same thing if you wake up before the alarm, 60 minutes or as little as 30 minutes. Carry on listening and allow sleep to come back for you again. And you may wonder what the point of that is. What good is an extra 60 minutes or 30 minutes of sleep? But I've had people actually email and thank me for suggesting that. Because there's something about allowing yourself complete relaxation right before the alarm that's satisfying on a whole new level. And it's very important that you try to relax. If you're new to the show and prone to late nights lying staring at the ceiling, this may seem strange to you. So give it a chance. Because I'm here to work with you. To create a safe space. A cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. Before we get on with the show, I'd like to ask for a couple of minutes of your time. Holiday season is incoming, and now would be a great time to sign up for the Patreon, or make a once-off contribution via the tip jar on the Sleepy Time Tales website. Patreon support has fallen off a bit as some long-time supporters have moved on, which is perfectly fine. I'm grateful for the support while it lasted, and I'm grateful for everyone who listens. I appreciate any help I get, and would be really thankful for anyone who can step into the gap if they're so inclined. Because I'm in South Africa, a few dollars goes a very long way. So even at the lowest contribution level or whatever tip you can spare, it really will be useful. Don't feel guilty if you can't, but if you have been considering it, now would be a great time. On the Patreon, there's a $2 and a $5 level with rewards available for that. And whatever you contribute there or through the tip jar will really, as I say, go a very long way. But another way to help the show is simply to spread the word. You can help me in my mission to give more people a restful night's sleep by telling people about it if you know someone who's struggling. And if you do it on social media, please make sure to tag me in at Sleepy Time Tales on Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok, where I can see and I can thank you. Shout out to the music, which is Sweet Night and Friends by Kumiko. Their work is available on their website at loyaltyfreakmusic.com. And just as a fun aside, I'm working on my own piece of music, which I'm going to start using from episode 200 on the 19th of December. I'm very rusty, so I've spent months on this 30-second clip, but it's starting to come together. I'll share a very rough mix on the Patreon in the next week or so for people to have an idea of what's coming. Thanks again. Thanks for your time. Let's get back to the show. We return this week to Our Mutual Friend by Charles Dickens. We are all very much interested in the man from somewhere, Veneering observes. Then the four buffers, taking heart of all grace all four at once, say, deeply interested, quite excited, dramatic, man from nowhere perhaps. And then Mrs. Veneering, for the Lady Tippin's winning wiles are contagious, folds her hands in the manner of a supplicating child, turns to her left neighbour and says, tease, man from Tumway. At which the four buffers, again mysteriously moved all four at once, explain, you can't resist. Upon my life, says Mortimer languidly, I find it immensely embarrassing to have the eyes of Europe upon me to this extent. And my only consolation is that you will all of you execrate Lady Tippins in your secret hearts when you find, as you inevitably will, the man from somewhere a bore. Sorry to destroy romance by fixing him with a local habitation, but he comes from the place, the name of which escapes me, but will suggest itself to everyone else here where they make the wine. Eugene suggests Dane Martin's. No, not that place, returns the unmoved Mortimer. That's where they make the port. My man comes from the country where they make the Cape wine. But look here, old fellow, it's not at all statistical and it's rather odd. It is always noticeable at the table of the Veneerings that no man troubles himself much about the Veneerings themselves, and that anyone who has anything to tell generally tells it to anyone else in preference. The man, Mortimer goes on, addressing Eugene, whose name is Harmon, was only son of a tremendous old rascal who made his money by dust. Red velveteens and a bell, the gloomy Eugene inquires. And a ladder and basket if you like. By which means, or by others, he grew rich as a dust contractor, and lived in a hollow in a hilly country entirely composed of dust. On his own small estate, the growling old vagabond threw up his own mountain range, like an old volcano, and its geological formation was dust. Coal dust, vegetable dust, bone dust, crockery dust, rough dust, and sifted dust. all manner of dust. A passing remembrance of Mrs. Veneering here induces Mortimer to address his next half-dozen words to her, after which he wanders away again, tries Twemlow and finds he doesn't answer, ultimately takes up with the Buffers, who receive him enthusiastically. The moral being, I believe that's the right expression, of this exemplary person derived its highest gratification from anathematizing his nearest relations and turning them out of doors. Having begun, as was natural, by rendering these attentions to the wife of his bosom, he next found himself at leisure to bestow a similar recognition on the claims of his daughter. He chose a husband for her entirely to his own satisfaction, and not in the least to hers, and proceeded to settle upon her as her marriage portion. I don't know how much dust, but something immense. At this stage of the affair, the poor girl respectfully intimated that she was secretly engaged to that popular character, whom the novelists and versifiers call another, and that such a marriage would make the dust of her heart and the dust of her life. In short, would set her up on a very extensive scale in her father's business. Immediately the venerable parent, on a cold winter's night, it is said, anathematized and turned her out. Here the analytical chemist, who has evidently formed a very low opinion of Mortimer's story, concedes a little claret to the Buffers, who once again mysteriously moved all four at once, screw it slowly into themselves with a peculiar twist of enjoyment, as they cry in chorus, "Pray go on." The pecuniary resources of another were, as they usually are, of a very limited nature. I believe I am not using too strong an expression when I say that another was hard up. However, he married the young lady, and they lived in a humble dwelling, probably possessing a porch ornamented with honeysuckle and woodbine twining until she died. I must refer you to the registrar of the district in which the humble dwelling was situated, for the certified cause of death. But early sorrow and anxiety may have had to do with it, though they may not appear in the ruled pages and printed forms. Indisputably this was the case with another, for he was so cut up by the loss of his young wife that if he outlived her a year, it was as much as he did. There is that in the indolent Mortimer which seems to hint that if good society might on any account allow itself to be irrepressible, he, one of good society, might have the weakness to be impressed by what he here relates. It is hidden with great pains, but it is in him. The gloomy Eugene, too, is not without some kindred touch. For when that appalling Lady Tippins declares that if another had survived, he should have gone down at the head of her list of lovers. And also when the mature young lady shrugs her epaulets and laughs at some private and confidential comment from the mature young gentleman. His gloom deepens to that degree that he trifles quite ferociously with his dessert knife. Mortimer proceeds. We must now return, as novelists say, and as we all wish they wouldn't, to the man from somewhere. Being a boy of 14, cheaply educated at Brussels when his sister's expulsion befell, it was some little time before he heard of it, probably from herself, for the mother was dead, and that I don't know. Instantly he absconded and came over here. He must have been a boy of spirit and resource, to get here on a stopped allowance of 5 sous a week. But he did it somehow, and he burst in on his father, and pleaded his sister's cause. Venerable parent promptly resorts to anathematization and turns him out. Shocked and terrified boy takes flight, seeks his fortune, gets aboard ship, ultimately turns up on dry land among the Cape One. Small proprietor, farmer, grower, whatever you like to call it. At this juncture, shuffling is heard in the hall, and tapping is heard at the dining room door. Analytical chemist goes to the door, confers angrily with the unseen tapper, appears to become mollified by descrying reason in the tapping, and goes out. So he was discovered only the other day after having been expatriated about 14 years. A buffer, suddenly astounding the other three by detaching himself and asserting individuality, inquires, how discovered and why? Oh, to be sure, thank you for reminding me. Venerable parent dies. Same buffer, emboldened by success, says, when? The other day, 10 or 12 months ago. Same buffer inquires with smartness, what of? But herein perishes a melancholy example, being regarded by the three other buffers with a stony stare and attracting no further attention from any mortal. Venerable parent, Mortar repeats with passing remembrance that there is a Veneering at the table, and for the first time addressing him, dies. The gratified Veneering repeats gravely, dies, and folds his arms and composes his brow to hear it out in a judicial manner, where he finds himself again as deserted in the bleak world. His will is found, said Mortimer, catching Mrs. Podsnap's rocking horse's eye. It is dated very soon after the sun's flight. It leaves the lowest of the range of dust mountains with some sort of dwelling house at its foot, to an old servant who is sole executor, and all the rest of the property, which is very considerable, to the son. He directs himself to be buried with certain eccentric ceremonies and precautions against his coming to life, which I need not bore you, and that's all, except, and this ends the story. The analytical chemist returning, everybody looks at him. Not because anyone wants to see him, but because of that subtle influence in nature, which impels humanity to embrace the slightest opportunity of looking at anything, rather than the person who addresses it. Except that the son's inheriting is made conditional on his marrying a girl, who at the date of the will was a child of 4 or 5 years old, and who is now a marriageable young woman. Advertisement and inquiry discovered the son in the man from somewhere, and at the present moment is on his way home from there. No doubt in a state of great astonishment, to succeed to a very large fortune, and to take a wife. Mrs. Podsnap inquires whether the young person is a person of personal charms. Mortimer is unable to report. Mr. Podsnap inquires what would become of the very large fortune in the event of the marriage condition not being fulfilled. Mortimer replies that by special testamentary clause, it would then go to the old servant above mentioned, passing over and excluding the son. Also that if the son had not been living, the same old servant would have been sole residuary legatee. Mrs. Veneering had just succeeded in waking Lady Tippins from a snore by dexterously shunting a train of plates and dishes at her knuckles across the table, when everybody but Mortimer himself becomes aware that the analytical chemist is in a ghostly manner offering him a folded paper. Curiosity detains Mr. Veneering in a few moments. Mortimer, in spite of all the arts of the chemist, placidly refreshes himself with a glass of Madeira, and remains unconscious of the document which engrosses the general attention, until Lady Tippins, who has a habit of waking totally insensible, having remembered where she is and recovered a perception of surrounding objects, says, "Falser man than Don Juan, why don't you take the note from the commentador?" Upon which the chemist advances it under the nose of Mortimer, who looks round at him and says, "What's this?" The analytical chemist bends and whispers. "Who?" says Mortimer. Analytical chemist again bends and whispers. Mortimer stares at him and unfolds the paper, reads it twice, turns it over to look at the blank outside, reads it a third time. "This arrives in an extraordinarily opportune manner," says Mortimer then, looking with an altered face round the table. "This is the conclusion of the story of the identical man. Already married, one guesses. Declines to marry, another guesses. Codicil among the dust, another guesses." "Why no," says Mortimer. "Remarkable thing, you're all wrong. The story is completer and rather more exciting than I supposed. Man's drowned." Chapter 3. Another Man. As the disappearing skirts of the ladies ascended the Veneering staircase, Mortimer, following them forth from the dining room, turned into a library of brand new books, in brand new bindings, liberally gilded, and requested to see the messenger who had brought the paper. He was a boy of about 15. Mortimer looked at the boy, and the boy looked at the brand new pilgrims on the wall, going to Canterbury in more gold frame than procession, and more carving than country. "Whose writing is this?" "Mine, sir." "Who told you to write it?" "My father, Jesse Hexam." "Is it he who found the body?" "Yes, sir." "What is your father?" The boy hesitated, looking reproachfully at the pilgrims as if they had involved him in a little difficulty, then said, folding a plate in the right leg of his trousers, "He gets his living along shore." "Is it far?" "Is which far?" asked the boy, upon his guard, and again upon the road to Canterbury. "To your father's." "It's a goodish stretch, sir. I come up in a cab, and the cab's waiting to be paid." "We could go back in it before you paid it, if you liked." "I went first to your office, according to the direction of the papers found in the pockets, and there I see nobody but a chap of about my age who sent me on here." There was a curious mixture in the boy, of uncompleted savagery and uncompleted civilization. His voice was hoarse and coarse, and his face was coarse, and his stunted figure was coarse. But he was cleaner than other boys of his type, and his writing, though large and round, was good. And he glanced at the backs of the books with an awakened curiosity that went below the binding. No one who can read ever looks at a book, even unopened on a shelf, like one who cannot. "Were there any means taken, do you know, boy, to ascertain if it was possible to restore life?" Mortimer inquired as he sought for his hat. You wouldn't ask, sir, if you knew his state. Pharaoh's multitude that were drowned in the Red Sea ain't more beyond restoring to life. If Lazarus was only half as far gone, it was the greatest of all the miracles. Hello, cried Mortimer, turning around with his hat upon his head. You seem to be at home in the Red Sea, my young friend. Read of it with the teacher at school, said the boy. And Lazarus? Yes, and him too. But don't you tell my father. We should have no peace in our place if that got touched upon. It's my sister's contriving. You seem to have a good sister. She ain't half bad, said the boy. But if she knows her letters, it's the most she does, and them I learned her. The gloomy Eugene, with his hands in his pockets, had strolled in and assisted at the latter part of the dialogue, when the boy spoke these words, slightingly of his sister. He took him roughly enough by the chin and turned up his face to look at it. Well, I'm sure, sir, said the boy, resisting. I hope you'll know me again. Eugene vouchsafed no answer, but made the proposal to Mortimer. I'll go with you if you like. So they all three went away together in the vehicle that had brought the boy. The two friends, once boys together at a public school, inside, smoking cigars. The messenger on the box beside the driver. Let me see, said Mortimer as they went along. I have been, Eugene, upon the honourable roll of solicitors of the High Court of Chancery and attorneys at common law 5 years, and except gratuitously taking instructions on an average once a fortnight for the will of Lady Tippins, who has nothing to leave, I have no scrap of business but this romantic business. And I, said Eugene, have been called 7 years, and have had no business at all, and never shall have any. And if I had, I shouldn't know how to do it. I am far from being clear as to the last particular, returned Mortimer, with great composure, that I have much advantage over you. I hate, said Eugene, putting his legs up on the opposite seat. I hate my profession. Shall I incommode you if I put mine up too? Returned Mortimer. Thank you. I hate mine. It was forced upon me, said the gloomy Eugene, because it was understood that we wanted a barrister in the family. We have got a precious one. It was forced upon me, said Mortimer, because it was understood that we wanted a solicitor in the family. And we have got a precious one. There are 4 of us, with our names painted on a doorpost and right of one black hole called a set of chambers, said Eugene. And each of us has the 4th of a clerk, Kasim Baba, on the robber's cave, and Kasim is the only respectable member of the party. I am one by myself. One, said Mortimer, high up an awful staircase commanding a burial ground. And I have a whole clerk to myself, and he has nothing to do but look at the burial ground and what he will turn out when arrived at maturity. I cannot conceive. Whether in that shabby rook's nest he is always plotting wisdom or plotting murder, whether he will grow up, after so much solitary brooding, to enlighten his fellow creatures, or to poison them, is the only speck of interest that presents itself to my professional view. Will you give me a light? Thank you. Then idiots talk, said Eugene, leaning back, holding his arms, smoking with his eyes shut, and speaking slightly through his nose, of energy. If there is a word in the dictionary under any letter from A to Z that I abominate, it is energy. It is such a conventional superstition, such parrot gabble. What the deuce? Am I to rush out into the street, collar the first man of a wealthy appearance that I meet, shake him and say, "Go to law upon the spot, you dog, and retain me, or I'll be the death of you"? Yet that would be energy. Precisely my view of the case, Eugene. But show me a good opportunity. Show me something really worth being energetic about, and I'll show you energy. And so will I, said Eugene. And it is likely enough that 10,000 other young men, within the limits of the London post office town delivery, made the same hopeful remark in the course of the same evening. The wheels rolled on and rolled down by the monument and by the tower, and by the docks down by Ratcliffe, and by Rotherhithe down by where accumulated scum of humanity seemed to be washed from higher grounds, like so much moral sewage, and to be pausing until its own weight forced it over the bank and sunk it in the river. In and out among vessels that seemed to have got ashore, and houses that seemed to have got afloat, among bowsplits staring into windows and windows staring into ships, the wheels rolled on, until they stopped at a dark corner, river-washed and otherwise not washed at all, where the boy alighted and opened the door. "You must walk the rest, sir. It's not many yards." He spoke in the singular number, to the express exclusion of Eugene. "This is a confoundedly out-of-the-way place," said Mortimer, slipping over the stones and refuse on the shore, as the boy turned the corner sharp. "It is my father's, sir, where the light is." The low building had the look of having once been a mill. There was a rotten wart of wood upon its forehead that seemed to indicate where the sails had been, but the whole was very indistinctly seen in the obscurity of the night. The boy lifted the latch of the door, and they passed at once into a low circular room, where a man stood before a red fire, looking down into it, and a girl sat engaged in needlework. The fire was a rusty brazier, not fitted to the hearth, and a common lamp, shaped like a hyacinth root, smoked and flared in the neck of a stone bottle on the table. There was a wooden bunk or berth in the corner, and in another corner a wooden stair leading above, so clumsy and steep that it was little better than a ladder. 2 or 3 old sculls and oars stood against the wall, and another part of the wall was a small dresser, making a spare show of the commonest articles of crockery and cooking vessels. The roof of the room was not plastered, but it was formed of the flooring of the room above. This, being very old, knotted, seamed and beamed, gave a lowering aspect to the chamber, and roof and walls and floor alike abounding in old smears of flour, red lead, or some such stain, which it had probably acquired in warehousing, and damp alike had a look of decomposition. "The gentleman, father." The figure at the red fire turned, raised its ruffled head, and looked like a bird of prey. "You're Mortimer Lightwood, Esquire, are you, sir?" "Mortimer Lightwood is my name." "What you found," said Mortimer, glancing rather shrinkingly towards the bunk. "Is it here?" "'Tain't not to say here, but it's close by. I do everything regular. Give notice of the circumstance to the police, and the police have took possession of it. No time ain't been lost on any hand. The police have put into print already, and here's what the print says of it." Taking up the bottle with the lamp in it, he held it near a paper on the wall, with the police heading, "Body found." The two friends read the handbill as it stuck against the wall, and Gaffer read them as he held the light. "Only papers on the unfortunate man, I see," said Lightwood, glancing from the description of what was found to the finder. "Only papers." Here the girl arose with her work in her hand and went out the door. "No money," pursued Mortimer, "but threepence in one of the skirt pockets." "3 penny pieces," said Gaffer Hexam, in as many sentences. Gaffer Hexam nodded. "But that's common. Whether it's the wash of the tide or no, I can't say. Now here," moving the light to another similar placard, "his pockets were found empty and turned inside out. And here," moving the light to another, "her pocket was found empty and turned inside out. And so was this one's. And so was that one's. I can't read, nor I don't want it, for I know 'em by their places on the wall. This one was a sailor with 2 anchors and a flag, and GFT on his arm. Look and see if he won't." "Quite right." "This one was the young woman in grey boots, and a linen marked with a cross. Look and see if she won't." "Quite right." "This is him had a nasty cut over the eye." "This is them 2 young sisters what tied themselves together with a handkerchief." "This is the drunken old chap, in a pair of list slippers and a nightcap. What it offered, it afterwards came out, to make a hole in the water for a quartern of rum stood aforehand, and kept to his word for the first and last time in his life. They pretty well papers the room, you see, but I know 'em all. I'm scholar enough." He waved the light over the whole as if to typify the light of his scholarly intelligence, and then put it down on the table and stood behind it, looking intently at his visitors. He had the special peculiarity of some birds of prey, that when he knitted his brow his ruffled crest stood highest. "You did not find all these yourself, did you?" asked Eugene. To which the bird of prey slowly rejoined, "And what might your name be now?" "This is my friend," Mortimer Lightwood interposed, "Mr. Eugene Rayburn." "Mr. Eugene Rayburn, is it? And what might Mr. Eugene Rayburn have asked of me?" "I asked you simply if you found them all yourself." "I answer you, simply, most on 'em." "Do you suppose there's been much violence and robbery beforehand among these cases?" "I don't suppose it any all about it," returned Gaffer. "I ain't one of the supposing sort. If you've got your living to haul out of the river every day of your life, you mightn't be much to given to supposing. Am I to show the way?" As he opened the door, in pursuance of a nod from Lightwood, an extremely pale and disturbed face appeared in the doorway. The face of a man much agitated. "A body missing?" asked Gaffer Hexam, stopping short. "Or body found? Which?" "I am lost," replied the man, in a hurried and eager manner. "Lost? I am a stranger, and I don't know the way. I want to find the place where I can see what is described here. It is possible I may know it." He was panting and could hardly speak, but he showed a copy of the newly printed bill that was still wet upon the wall. Perhaps its newness, or perhaps the accuracy of his observation of its general look, guided Gaffer to a ready conclusion. This gentleman, Mr. Lightwood, is on that business. Mr. Lightwood? During a pause, Mortimer and the stranger confronted each other. Neither knew the other. I think, sir, said Mortimer, breaking the awkward silence with his airy self-possession, that you did me the honor to mention my name. I repeated it after this man. You said you were a stranger in London? An utter stranger. Are you seeking a Mr. Harmon? No. Then I believe I can assure you that you are on a fruitless errand, and will not find what you fear to find. Will you come with us? And I think I'll leave it on there for tonight. As always, if you'd like to carry on where we've left off, you can find the original on Project Gutenberg at the link in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepy Time Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. A reminder that the music for tonight is Sweet Night and Friends by Kumiko. Check out more of their work on their website, which you'll find linked in the show notes. Good night, and sweet dreams.